I'm really proud to have him as the last speaker here, because if you ever want to be inspired, I think positivism, success stories, that work so well. You know, we can start talking about how we want it different, but just one video or one example where everything went okay the way you wanted it, it helps, and it makes you very, very happy. It makes me very, very happy. And I think John Liu has, for 15 years, well, he's been a filmmaker and everything, but he got transformed into a person who can tell the story of success. And I'm sure he's going to talk about it. Let me tell you a little bit more about him. He worked as a television journalist in China for CBS News, Radiotelevisione Italiana, Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen, oh God, German Television and others. And then he sort of, well, maybe he will talk about that too himself, but he always looked at projects from a point of view where he thought, well, if you want to change the world, somebody else has to do it. And then he realized, well, why don't I do it? And that was a big transition. And now he has made some fascinating films about, you've probably seen 2009 Lessons from the Loose Plateau, about the restoration of ecosystem functioning in China. You'll hear about it. Hope in a Changing Climate, and that was fantastic too, 2010. And it's all about investing in local people. If you empower people to make it better for themselves, again, the locality, then things will work really well. So, John, please come up here. Where are you here? I'm very, very honored to have you here. And we're looking forward to see a lot of success. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I on? I'll have to overcome my basic shyness in order to speak to you. Okay. I'm not extroverted. And I hope you can understand me through my thick Chinese accent. I want to take you on a journey. It's a journey that I've been taking now for about 17 years. I've gone around the world, and I've gone back in time, and I also want to take you a little bit into the future. And I've been looking at ecosystems, functional ecosystems and degraded ecosystems. And the journey really for me started high up in the Himalayan mountains, in the Tibetan Plateau. This is in Qinghai province in China. And it's where a river that was once known as the Mother River begins. And it was known as the Mother River because all the different tribal groups started there. And one group became very successful. It was the Han Chinese. And the Han Chinese became the dominant tribe in the region. And I think part of it was because they could cook really well. So everybody was going to their restaurants. It was very successful. But this area is called the Loose Plateau, where the Chinese race emerged. It's about 640,000 square kilometers. It's in the northwestern part of China, so it's approximately the size of France. And it's named for its geomorphology, the provenance of its soil type. So the soil is created by glacier movements high in the Himalayas, and it's deposited by wind onto the plateau below. It's very fine, powdery soil, and it's the largest deposits of loess anywhere in the world. Now, this is the birthplace of the Chinese people, so if you dig around in there, you could find some interesting things occasionally. Maybe he will in a moment. Yes. So the Han, the Qin, the Tang dynasties were all based in this region. to the southwest in Sichuan is a fully functional forested ecosystem. It's magnificent with trees and water and biodiversity. It's still functional today. If you go to the northeast, you find a fully functional grassland ecosystem in Mongolia. Some of the largest ungulate migrations still on Earth here. So there's a lot of evidence that's in a mixed forest grassland system where the Chinese emerged. This is also similar to Africa, by the way, in the Rift Valley. Now there's evidence of humans and their ancestors for 1.5 million years as opposed to 5 million in the Rift Valley. And this is the second place on Earth where settled agriculture began. But when the Chinese were developing their civilization, the science and the art, they were also sowing the seeds of the destruction. And in 1995, I was asked to begin this documentation in the Loose Plateau by the World Bank. And I found a fully degraded ecosystem. And it had been degraded for 1,000 years. So 1,000 years ago, the seat of power and affluence had left this area, and it was completely denuded of vegetation. And I was shocked that the most populous ethnic group on the planet could come from a place that looked this devastated. And I wanted to know more, and so I started a very long inquiry that continues to this day. And I found that it's understandable what happened here. They cut the trees. When the trees were gone, they did slope farming, and then they free-ranged goats and sheep until everything was destroyed. And they followed this by passing the behaviors from generation to generation. So each generation, the situation became worse. It was disaccumulative. So they had always less biodiversity, always less biomass, and always less accumulated organic matter. And I began to follow these things. I started thinking about what does this mean? And I found that, of course, it's a cycle of poverty. And then I realized it's not simply China. Every one of the cradles of civilization have followed the same trajectory and had the same outcome. But the Chinese decided they were going to change it. And so they made some 3 years of studies, and they decided that they had to ban the negative behaviors. So they made tree cutting illegal. They made free-ranging of goats and sheep illegal, and they made slope farming illegal. And you can see here that what is actually one of the basic functions that had been lost was the hydrological cycle. And they were eroding the fertility, and they were also losing the water. So everyone thought this place was a desert. But if you looked around, you had huge gullies. Where did these huge gullies come from? So they made some decisions, and they decided that they were going to differentiate ecological and economic land, but not everybody agreed. But this is what they began to do. They hired everyone into a program. They used participatory assessment mechanisms to make them understand, but they also paid them. So the people here are getting 3 benefits. They're getting paid for their labor, they're learning new skills, and they're going to own the outcome from those fields. But it's so big, the scale was 35,000 square kilometers for the active project area. So this is not about production, and either for individuals or communities. It's at the scale of ecosystems. And this is what happened. So in 1995, you had a fully degraded ecosystem, and this is in late autumn 1995. This is in late autumn 2009. So what you started to see was that each year, now this is accumulative. They have consistently more biodiversity, consistently more biomass, and consistently more accumulated organic material. Again, 95 and 2009. And what's interesting is it's the ecological land, the release of ecological land for natural vegetation that helps infiltrate and retain rainfall. So this made me very philosophical, having seen this. I mean, initially, I realized that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. Now, that's an extraordinary thing. And I thought, well, there's so many places around the world where there are degraded ecosystems. And now I've been to most of them. I've been to about 80 countries looking at this. And I found that there are several scientific implications. But simply stated, biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter are the determinants for sustainability and survival for humanity and the planet. So everything, the hydrological cycle, carbon infiltration, carbon sequestration, oxygen levels, microbial communities, which we talked about earlier, the microbes are not only recycling, they're releasing minerals from geologic materials, which they've been doing throughout evolutionary time. That's how all biomass accumulated. And, of course, it's also true that each generation of life is laying down its body. But what we saw was that these functions, basic functions, like hydrology, but also its weather. So suddenly, you note that in this area, it's completely different. The temperature differentials are different. It's 10 to 20 degrees centigrade cooler beneath a tree canopy than it is in exposed soils. It's outrageous. So I started to think, what is going on? And I started to think way back in time to geologic time. And I realized that the Earth was a molten rock that was surrounded by poisonous gases. And yet now it's completely colonized by biological life. And that all of the biomass and all of the organic matter and all of the fossil fuels had been created in this way. There is no possibility we can build a machine that is a biochemical photoreactive processor that can sequester carbon in such scale as this. It is wonderful. And these basic functions are determined by biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter. So in the places where you had a desert with no fertility, now you can grow food and you can infiltrate the 450 to 600 millimeters of rainfall that they have. So I started to think about this on the larger scale. What is happening here? What has happened that we have looked at this? And I started to realize that there's a relationship between this and the human economy. And the relationship between the human economy is that we have said that this is zero. This is nothing in the current economy. All the biodiversity, all the function is zero. And that is frankly wrong. So we believe, supposedly, that production and consumption of goods and services is the basis of wealth. But it's not. So we have based our entire human economy on a mistake in logic. There's no possibility that the beauty and the function and the synergies of the natural systems are worth less than the things which are produced by human beings. This system has been functional for billions of years. It's constantly renewable, it's resilient, it's robust. There's nothing wrong with the Earth. The problem is human beings. And the fact is also that we can rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. Now, when you look at this and you say, well, that absolutely has a value. It's impossible for that to be worth less. So, what's wrong? We've inverted our economy. If we look at this, all the cosmologies tell us that human beings emerged in paradise, and we were cast out because of the original sin. Well, if that's not a religious dogma, but it's a poetic metaphor, what is it that equals this? Reduction of biodiversity causes a reduction in the creation of biomass, which necessitates a reduction in the accumulation of organic matter, and paradise is lost. So if you look at this another way, and you consider the fact that the economic system has been inverted, and that we have inflated the derivatives and discounted the source. So we now can talk about this. I think a few years ago it was very difficult to talk about this. But when you have such an economy, you necessitate creation of climate change, biodiversity loss, desertification, poverty and disparity and conflict. So if you don't change the flaw, you'll get the same result. And every civilization has had that same thing. Now the solution is invert the economy, correct the flaw. And this brings us to a question about money. What is money? So money, as I understand it, is a storehouse of value. And it's a means of exchange. And it reflects what we value. So it's a belief system. So this is a belief system. If we believe money is created by production and consumption of goods and services, then it is. But if we understand that the natural ecological systems are more valuable than production and consumption of goods and services, then actually money should be based on ecologic function. And if money is based on ecologic function, then something very magical happens, because it's impossible to pollute or degrade the system anymore. So for those of us who don't understand ecology and wouldn't choose it, will also be motivated, and they will be the strongest advocates of conservation and restoration. And conservation is the way to protect wealth, and restoration is the way to increase wealth. And suddenly we have a growth economy again. But it's a growth economy that's accumulating organic matter, accumulating biomass, and increasing the space for biodiversity to survive. So this is what I think is a solution to all of these problems. We need to understand that our problems are survival issues, and that there are billions of people now who are hungry. But there is no biophysical reason why the Earth should remain degraded. We do not have to accept degraded states. But we have some work to do. We have to understand what's the flaw, we have to correct the flaw, and then we all have to work together to restore all degraded lands on the planet. And when wealth is coming from ecological function, the people who live in this place now are poor. How could they possibly be poor? We're giving the money to these people in Wall Street who are doing nothing, and we're saying that these people must remain poor. It's wrong. We need to change. So that's what I have to say to you. Thanks a lot.
Fantastic. What impressed me in your film too is that you showed the people before and after, and how it didn't only, enrich the environment, but it was also that social aspect. People were not poor, as you said at the end, but they were rich. They had fruits. They went to markets. Their income was really improved, and that was one of the great, successes that I really loved. Rob van Hattem from Tegenlicht, and you made the last Tegenlicht on groen goud. You may have seen it. If not, go to vpro.nl. It's another impressive one. And you went to Jordania
Yes.
at that time, and you saw the princess, I think, who wanted to, inspired by your example, green the whole of Jordania, just about.
Well, I don't think it's all about me. It's more
it's what you
about
show
the
them, right? I know you're not doing it in that sense, but you're showing the world. And I think that, we talked about it today. How can we get it to the bigger public? When your film was shown on Tegenlicht, I got a lot of tweets from people saying, do you guys know this as scientists? Do you guys do this in Wageningen? Do you do this at the NEO? That kind of tweet. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's just not known to a lot of people. And what you've done is you make the success a story people can understand. I wish you were standing at the G8 and sort of telling them about that. So,
yeah, I think there are other success stories. Probably the greatest one we're having right now is Rwanda.
Yeah.
So Rwanda rewrote their land use policy laws.
Yeah.
And they've linked their development with ecological function. They have experienced, for the last 5 years, 8% growth in a global recession. They have food security at a time when surrounding them there is famine. And 85% of their hydrological resources in the upland wetlands are
and a
bad.
boosting economy. So
Yes.
And that's the nice thing, It's not something that stops an economy because we have to pay for this restoration kind of thing.
Actually, I think if we understand the basis of money, there is no cost to this at all. We have to do this. It's a requirement. Because if we're unable to do this, then our economies, our civilization will hit the wall. Yeah. So we have to do this, and what we find is that the economy is actually larger than the production and consumption economy.
Oh,
so the production and consumption economy is tiny compared to the natural economy. Yeah. And also the natural economy can be much more fairly distributed. So billions of people around the world who are now poor are only poor because they don't manufacture and buy things in the global economy. That's not right.
No.
They're equal. And if we understand that and we treat them that way, we have to go back to the historical precedents and realize that there are some terrible historical crimes that need to be addressed. And they can be addressed at this time because we know what's wrong. We've based an economy and institutionalized a mistake. Yeah. And we can't just keep going around like, well, let's just try some incremental things around and leave the central error in place. We must extract this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much again for your great words. I think this is the value that we really have to value, and that is what our money should be based on. That is how we started this whole session. It's more than an energy transition. Energy is not even the problem. The problem is that we have the wrong monetary system, the wrong economy. We're valuing the wrong things. And the major value, obviously, is ecosystem functioning and biodiversity. You've made it very, very clear.
Thank you.
And I think those are fantastic a last contribution to this overwhelming day. I want to give you a hand. Go on, John. Now, the best thing we could do to help you who made the films even much more is to look at these films, show them in your department, show them as a professional, like we heard before, and spread the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's easy to find me, John Liu, at EEMP.org. That's Environmental Education Media Project.org.
And if you can't find it, you work for IUCN as
IUCN
well, so it doesn't matter.
Easy.
One Google is enough to find you anyway. So.